We're heading down a dirt road towards an epicenter of Mexico's violence. Right now, this is the only route into the small town of Aguililla in the state of Michoacán. It's trapped between two cartels and cut off from the rest of the state. We've been told that this hillside track is a back way in, but even that's under control. We've just seen in quick succession a checkpoint that we had to pass through with armed guys by the side of the road, a burnt out truck, and then the initials of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel actually scrawled on the road itself. There's no real doubt about whose territory we're in. We'd asked our Jalisco cartel commander for permission to travel this way. Otherwise, we'd never have risked it. On the way, we passed soldiers for the cartel. They say they're the special forces. This isn't a desperate rabble, it's a private army, and it's advancing. Eventually, we arrive at their local center of operations and ask for an interview. They agree to talk at what they say is a clandestine airstrip 10 minutes away. You gave this interview because you wanted to make a point. What is that point?
El Cártel Jalisco somos, entre comillas, los que somos malos, los que somos terroristas, los que extorsionamos, los que robamos. Y no es así. ¿Por qué? Porque nosotros no tenemos necesidad de robar. Nosotros somos narcotraficantes.
But the reality is that the four letters, as they're called here, are brutal, ruthless. They've killed police and disappeared civilians across the country. And now they're invading Michoacán. We're here to ask what that means for an already traumatized population and who is going to stop them. We're heading into a war zone. The southwest state of Michoacán is where Mexico's drug war began. When ex-President Felipe Calderón sent the army in to stop the cartels almost 15 years ago. But it didn't work. The conflict only grew as rival criminal groups and vigilantes fought for the state, extorting and terrorizing the population. But now those former enemies have come together under the banner of United Cartels to fight another, more powerful force invading from the state next door, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Its leader, Nemesio Ceguera, alias El Mencho, is from the Aguililla municipality himself. He wants his hometown and state badly.
Ánimo, bandera, ánimo, ánimo.
And on the clandestine airstrip, his men are on a publicity drive to justify their invasion.
El propósito y la indicación que nos dio el jefe es de que protejamos a la ciudadanía de su pueblo, porque él es de aquí. En sí él quiere su pueblo, ¿qué es lo que quiere? Que se acabe las cuotas y todo eso en su pueblo.
Over more than a decade in Michoacán now, different groups have said the same thing. La Familia, the Knights Templar organization, no, we're not going to get involved with the population, we're just doing our thing, we're just trafficking drugs. And in the end, all of them have done extortion, the things that they said they wouldn't do. Why should people believe that you and your cartel are different?
Pues, haz de cuenta que no queremos que lo crean. Porque haz de cuenta que no necesitan creerlo, los hechos están.
When the interview was over, I left feeling he hadn't revealed the cartel's true motives. Michoacán's got a lot to offer besides drugs. A lucrative mining business, the world's leading avocado industry. That must be drawing them here too. This state's a real prize. We were on the final stretch for Aguililla, the town at the center of this conflict. Surrounded by natural riches, coveted by the cartels. It might soon be one. Locals told us that thousands of people have already left, slipping past the siege and away. In the buildings, we saw the scars of the battle between United Cartels still here and the advancing Jalisco New Generation forces. You can see the bullet holes in this building. This happened just a week or two ago. That's what people here are saying. So if you come in here, the building got shot up and also this car. At the time of our visit, Jalisco had taken all of the land around the town. Meanwhile, United Cartels had placed a blockade further up the only official road in. Medicine, cooking gas, basic foodstuffs were all scarce. Even petrol had to be smuggled in. This is how you fill up in Aguililla. Businesses are dying. La Perilla Taqueria is just about surviving. It's where we met teacher Fernando Padilla, who became famous locally when he confronted the state governor Silvano Aureoles. Aureoles was on his first visit to Aguililla in years via helicopter just as election season kicked off.
Yo vine y protesté pacíficamente, le mandé los mensajes, gobernador venga por tierra para que vea la realidad en que vivimos nosotros.
Then the governor did this.
Pensé que iba a dialogar conmigo, pero arremetió contra mí. Al empujarme me dijo, cállate cabrón, y me empujó.
Another sign of governmental indifference towards this town and embattled region. It enraged townspeople like Gabriela Carbajal and her sister Daniela, already dealing with their own personal tragedy. Their grandfather had a burst stomach ulcer on the first day of the blockade. They couldn't get him through to the hospital on the other side. He died. When this happened, how did that make you guys feel? What was running through your mind?
Pues mucha impotencia. Impotencia porque no pudimos hacer nada. Era algo que estaba fuera de nuestras manos y era algo injusto. Entonces, pues eso provoca demasiado coraje.
What's it been like living like this for the last couple of years?
Pues es feo. Es feo porque antes era un pueblo muy tranquilo, muy libre. Y ahorita no podemos dejar a los niños porque es el miedo a estar pensando, a estar atentos, a escuchar ruidos porque en cualquier momento pueden tronar balas.
That night, we found out what she meant. You can probably hear that. That's the sound of gunfire. We're just outside of the village church. Night has only just fallen and they've started shooting here. A town and region trapped between cartels. Who would come to save them? Perhaps the state security chief, Israel Patron, the next to show up after the governor's failed visit with a battery of police trucks. We had a couple of questions for him.
Pero hay un retén por un grupo en esta dirección. Pasamos por una terracería, hay 3 retenes, otro grupo criminal por ahí. ¿Cómo es que el Estado de Michoacán no tiene estas rutas? ¿Cómo están en manos de criminales?
Bueno, estamos aquí precisamente para cubrir esos espacios que hoy tienen grupos de delincuencia organizada.
Porque ahora, cuando he estado pasando por años aquí, había sabido, ¿no? No sabía que había varios retenes de un grupo criminal.
Pues me gustaría saber a qué puntos te refieres. Si me pasas las coordenadas en cuanto terminamos la entrevista, podemos verificar.
It was bizarre that he claimed not to know about the blockades that he'd come to lift.
Muchas gracias.
Okay, muchas gracias.
But the people here say they're used to the government turning a blind eye. Although there's an army barracks in Aguililla, townspeople say they rarely patrol. And before the security chief's visit, we'd seen no police in the town. Still, he'd promised that the main road would now be cleared. It seemed our ticket out. We set off, relieved not to have to take the mountain track. But it was eerie, all but empty. Lined with burnt fields, bullet-marked road signs, and empty villages. Here perhaps is a vision of Aguililla's future, these ghost towns where all have fled. They've become common across Michoacán as the authorities have ceded ground to the cartels.
That you can see on the wall there, it's got the initials of Cartel Jalisco New Generation. the bullet hole. Among the broken glass of the floor, there's also fully poisoned swords. It's pretty unnerving to be here actually, in a completely deserted village in this house. There's no one else around except for us. We just heard gunshots really close to where we were there in the Levincito. So we're getting out as fast as we can.
But what we'd seen in the village stayed with us. We knew there were thousands of people who'd fled the violence, not just here but across the state. Where had they gone? What were they doing now? We set off for a nearby community, Los Halcones, to meet one of Michoacan's displaced. On a hot, languid afternoon, we waited for Candelario Serrano.
Llegaron tirándonos balazos de lo alto del cerro y pues tuvimos que salir huyendo aquí a este lugar, a esta comunidad.
Candelario fled his village, Los Cuches, a couple of months before. Now he's staying with whoever will take him in, 71 years old and suddenly homeless.
Ya a mi edad, ¿qué puedo hacer? No sé, tal vez pedir limosna, no me queda de otra.
Every week he goes back to check on his land. This time we went too, escorted by a self-defense group from Tepalcatepec, a nearby town. It was the only safe way to travel there. In the village, Candelario showed us where he'd lived since he was 4, and before the violence, laid his dad to rest.
Él quiso que aquí lo enterrara y ahí lo tengo.
¿Cómo se sintió para usted tener que abandonar la casa donde tiene entrado su papá?
Pues triste, humillado. No hay palabras para explicarles. A veces ni siquiera venir a traer una veladora. Ni modo, así es la vida y tenemos que aceptarla. Tenemos que olvidarnos de lo poco que tenemos, nos guste o no nos guste, quieramos o no quieramos.
The houses, the church, the village school, all empty. Candelario doesn't think he'll see them full again.
Tendrán que transcurrir quizás varios años para que se pueda controlar. Entonces ya en mi caso, yo creo que ya no va a haber que se componga esto.
But some towns haven't died out. Instead, they fought back. In 2013, self-defense forces began springing up across the state. Ragtag groups of townspeople taking up arms against the cartels. This was Tepalcatepec, one of the original groups back then. And this is them now. 8 years later, this is a professionalized force on the front lines against the Jalisco New Generation cartel. This lookout bunker has walls a forearm thick. It's a military installation.
En minutos, en segundos se llenó de gente aquí. Me pongo yo, tiro, está el siguiente, está por un lado de mí o abajo, nomás para darme el movión y sigue él. Así. ¿Verdad? Turnearnos.
Esta zanja se hace para todo el personal que viene.
Even the soldiers are full-time now, like Commander L8. He's only 20, one of many young townspeople here.
How do you feel about your job personally? This must get lonely, maybe a little bit boring being up here.
Yo me siento orgulloso, veo mi pueblo, pienso en mi familia, toda la gente que no se puede defender, nosotros lo defendemos.
While many other self-defense groups have disappeared, wiped out by the gangs or absorbed into state forces, Tepalcatepec remains. They enjoy strong support from the townspeople. After suffering terror and extortion before, now they live in relative peace. But there are questions about this force and many of Michoacan's other remaining self-defense groups. A lot of people have accused them of getting into the same business as the criminals, drug trafficking. Most flat out deny it, but Commander Sierra is surprisingly frank.
De que movemos droga, yo pienso que es una mentira decir que no. Sí movemos droga. Si yo quiero comprar un kilo de coca, metérselo a la batería de una camioneta y mandarlo a Estados Unidos, es mi lucha.
So what's the difference between them and the cartels?
Crimen, vamos a decir, los carteles te roban, te levantan, te matan, es diferente. Que venga alguien de Tepalcatepec y que diga, los autodefensas me extorsionaron, ahí sí no, eso no es cierto, eso no existe.
That's a very fine line between legitimate protectors and a criminal group. Even their guns are illegal.
Yo en lo particular las compras en Estados Unidos.
¿Usted cruza la frontera con armas? O otra gente, ¿no?
Otra gente.
Yeah.
Y lógico, escondidas. O pues, tienen arreglados también los de la aduana que también les gusta el billete.
Yeah.
A lot of men with a lot of guns veering towards illegality. The risks seem obvious. During our visit, they pulled this young man off a bus, suspicious of him.
Levanta las manos.
Están echando mentiras, trae dos credenciales con diferentes nombres. Y la otra es que traen drogas ahí.
¿Qué es esto? ¿Es cocaína o metanfetamina?
When they find further evidence, they detain him.
Pero te van a investigar si eres Jalisco, ¿no? Porque en tus audios de teléfono de WhatsApp se escuchan los radios que le estás comentando a tu comandante que quieres hablar con él.
Investigue el celular.
They told us he'd be sent to a rehab center, but before that, this.
Una foto aquí entre nosotros.
A souvenir and testament to their authority. To me, it also looks uncomfortably like the photos posted by the cartels themselves. Nothing is black and white here. And Tepalcatepec is just one of a multitude of armed groups operating in the state's hinterlands with varying degrees of legitimacy. It begs the question, where are the authorities in all of this? Why aren't they in control? When we saw police in these borderlands with Jalisco State, they seemed nervous, as if trespassing in enemy territory. The National Guard, a militarized force created to stop the violence, hasn't made much of a dent. Successive governments have failed to turn things around. But if there's a moment for change, this is it. Elections are here. And not just any old elections, but the biggest in Mexico's history. In Michoacan, everything's up for grabs, from state governor down. This is Rogelio Portillo. He's running for mayor in Huetamo, promising to stop the violence.
¿Cuál es la solución a esto?
Pues yo pienso que la generación de empleo, cuando tengamos empleo, muchas personas no tienen otra opción más que entrar a estos actos Pero si hubiera otra opción como la generación de empleo, la historia sería diferente. Con permiso, muchas gracias, Miriam. Buenos días, buenos días. Buenos días, buenos días.
Out on campaign, people seem on side.
Hola, ¿qué tal?
Hola, ¿qué tal? Buenos días.
Estamos con Morena.
Rogelio Portillo, el candidato de Morena.
Could this be Huetamos and part of Michoacan's new start?
¿Te podemos regalar una calcomanillita?
Sí, gracias.
Muchas gracias.
Adiós.
But in this state, there's always hidden undercurrents. As Portillo's campaign was just lifting off, this suddenly emerged. He was wanted by the US Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA, for alleged links to organized crime. This is one of Michoacan's biggest problems.
El candidato de toda la vida en Huetamo.
Journalists, analysts, and even criminals told us that many politicians themselves are in bed with the narcos. When Portillo stopped for breakfast at his campaign headquarters, I put that to him. There's obviously a reason why we're here, no? You appeared in the list of wanted from the DEA. Why are you in that list? Why are you wanted by the DEA?
Exactamente por qué no lo sé. Quiero pensar es por la situación que mi papá vivió una vez. Yo niego categóricamente que sea un delincuente.
Throughout our interview, he admitted to nothing personally, but did say there's endemic corruption here.
Hay muchos funcionarios públicos, y lo voy a decir específicamente de Michoacán, que han saqueado el Estado y están ligados directamente a otros grupos criminales, y hay pruebas y el pueblo lo sabe, y de eso nadie habla.
There are obvious benefits for politicians going into business with the narcos. Money, power, but it's not that cut and dried. Memo Valencia knows that better than most. In 2013, he was accused of colluding with a cartel when he was mayor of Tepalcatepec itself. But he says in Michoacan's hinterlands, politicians often have no choice.
Imagínate que la vida de una autoridad municipal, que está entre la espada y la pared, que tiene por un lado la presencia de grupos del crimen organizado tan peligrosos y por otro lado la indiferencia de las autoridades. O sea, un presidente municipal está solo, está realmente abandonado a su suerte.
Now he's running for mayor of Michoacan's capital, Morelia, saying he'll clear out the criminals there. But after we met him, this happened.
¡Urge una camilla, por favor! ¡Urge una camilla!
He wasn't in his truck at the time, but in Michoacan and the other parts of Mexico where gangs dominate, politicians who don't get on side can have a short life expectancy. Ruthless narco armies, rogue vigilantes, helpless or corrupt politicians, and daily tragedies. It's a bleak panorama. For many people, it's made living here impossible. They formed a wave of Michoacan migration, heading all the way to the US border looking for asylum. In the final stop in our journey, we went to the border too to speak to them. But even 2,000 kilometers from the gangs they'd fled, most were too scared to talk.
Aquí siéntate, Bondi.
Only Leticia Alejandre and her family agreed, on the condition that we didn't reveal the city they'd run to. The whole family, including her disabled dad and one-year-old granddaughter, had been sleeping rough in this donated tent for 5 nights before our visit. They fled when a gang came for Leticia's 17-year-old daughter.
Mi hija se la llevaron y pues 3 días duró que se me la secuestraron y la querían poner a vender pues droga pues. Y pues se lo advirtieron a ella que pues si no hacían lo que ellos decían que ella hiciera, pues nos iban a matar a todos.
The family resisted. Then came a last call from one of their neighbors. It was blunt.
O se alinean o las mato yo. Así que ustedes decidan.
¿Y qué hicieron en el momento en que terminó esa llamada?
Pues luego me puse a temblar y todo, le dije a mi hijo, dije, vámonos, porque va a venir a darme un brazo en la cabeza. nada, sacamos nada, más que agarré mis papeles, eso sí, y pues rápido.
¿Nunca fueron a regresar entonces?
No, ya no. Aunque estamos un poco sufriendo, pero preferimos mejor así, aquí, que estar allá.
We don't know how many people have made this journey from Michoacán to the US border in the 15 years since the drug war began, leaving everything behind. But with peace and security not even on the horizon in their state, they certainly won't be the last.